Ever wondered how to influence others ethically and effectively? The audiobook, The Persuasion Paradox, Critical Thinking to Influence Without Manipulation, holds the key. Unlock the power of ethical persuasion to transform your personal and professional relationships. Learn to influence with integrity, build lasting trust, and achieve your goals without compromising your values. Don't risk being left behind in a world where genuine influence is the ultimate currency. Elevate your persuasive skills and become a beacon of positive change. Before we go on, I invite you to download the free bundle, which contains the ebook version of this book and an executive summary of all the chapters with the key takeaways. Studies show that engaging with content through multiple formats significantly enhances learning and retention. Click on the first link in the description to claim your free bundle now and maximize your learning potential. Now it's free, but it won't be for long, so make sure to grab it while you can. Chapter 1, The Persuasion Paradox Unveiled, Influence versus Manipulation. In the bustling marketplace of ideas, one voice rises above the cacophony. It's not the loudest or the most insistent, but rather the most genuine and thoughtful. This voice belongs to the ethical persuader, a rare breed in a world often dominated by manipulators and coercers. But what sets this voice apart, and why should we listen? The art of persuasion is as old as human communication itself. From ancient philosophers to modern-day leaders, the ability to influence others has shaped the course of history. Yet, in our complex and interconnected world, a paradox has emerged. The most effective persuasion often comes not from forceful tactics or clever manipulation, but from a place of integrity, critical thinking, and mutual respect. This paradox lies at the heart of our exploration. How can we influence others without resorting to underhanded methods? Is it possible to persuade effectively while maintaining our ethical standards? And perhaps most intriguingly, could honesty and critical thought actually be more powerful tools of influence than deception and coercion? To answer these questions, we must first untangle the web of misconceptions surrounding persuasion and manipulation. These terms are often used interchangeably, but they represent fundamentally different approaches to influence. Understanding this distinction is crucial, as it sets the moral boundaries for all the strategies we'll explore in this book. Persuasion, in its purest form, is the art of guiding someone's beliefs or decisions through honest reasoning, evidence, and appeals to common values. It's a collaborative process, one that respects the autonomy of the other party and seeks mutual benefit. When you persuade ethically, you're inviting the other person to join you in a journey of understanding. You present your case clearly, address concerns openly, and allow for genuine dialogue. Manipulation, on the other hand, involves deceptive or coercive tactics designed primarily for personal gain. It's a one-sided approach that often disregards the welfare of the other party. Manipulators may use lies, half-truths, or emotional exploitation to achieve their goals. While manipulation can sometimes yield short-term results, it ultimately erodes trust and damages relationships. The critical thinking lens helps us distinguish between these two approaches. When we apply critical thought to our persuasive efforts, we question our own motives and methods. Are we presenting a balanced view of the facts? Have we considered potential counter-arguments? Are we respecting the other person's right to make an informed decision? These questions guide us toward ethical persuasion and away from manipulative tactics. But why does this distinction matter? In a world where winning often seems to be the only goal, why should we concern ourselves with the ethics of our influence? The answer lies in the long-term consequences of our actions. Ethical persuasion builds trust and credibility. When you consistently influence others through honest, well-reasoned arguments, you develop a reputation as a trustworthy source of information and insight. This reputation becomes a powerful asset, opening doors for future influence and collaboration. People are more likely to listen to someone they trust, even on topics where they might initially disagree. Conversely, manipulation may yield quick wins, but it comes at a steep cost. Once people realize they've been deceived or coerced, they're likely to become resistant to future influence attempts. The manipulator may find themselves increasingly isolated, their words carrying less and less weight over time. This brings us to the heart of the persuasion paradox. At first glance, manipulation might seem like the more powerful tool. After all, if you're willing to bend the truth or exploit emotions, surely you can achieve your goals more easily. But this view is short-sighted. In reality, straightforward, critical thought often proves more persuasive in the long run. Why? Because ethical persuasion respects the intelligence and autonomy of your audience. When you present a clear, logical argument and invite others to engage with it critically, you're not just trying to change their mind, you're helping them arrive at a new understanding on their own terms. This kind of influence is far more durable than compliance achieved through trickery or pressure. Moreover, ethical persuasion aligns with our deepest values as human beings. We all want to be treated with respect and honesty. When someone approaches us with transparency and genuine concern for our welfare, we're naturally more inclined to listen and consider their perspective. This approach taps into the human desire for connection and mutual understanding. The persuasion paradox also extends to our personal and professional lives. Being known as a critical thinking persuader rather than a manipulator enhances your authority and relationships. Colleagues, friends, and even opponents are more likely to engage with you in good faith if they know you have a track record of honest communication. This reputation can open doors and create opportunities that might remain closed to those who rely on manipulation. To navigate this paradox successfully, we must embrace certain principles of influence without manipulation. These principles serve as our ethical compass, guiding us toward persuasion that builds trust rather than eroding it. First and foremost is transparency. Being clear about your intentions and reasoning ensures that your audience never feels tricked or misled. This doesn't mean laying all your cards on the table at once, but rather being honest about your overall goals and the basis for your arguments. When people understand where you're coming from, they're more likely to engage with your ideas openly. Equally important is the concept of mutual benefit. Ethical persuasion isn't about winning at the other person's expense. Instead, it seeks outcomes where both parties gain something valuable. This requires careful thought about the other person's needs, values, and motivations. How can you frame your proposal in a way that aligns with their interests? By focusing on win-win scenarios, you create a collaborative atmosphere that's conducive to genuine influence. Respecting the autonomy of your audience is another crucial principle. This means crafting arguments that allow people to decide freely rather than resorting to force or guilt tactics. Critical thinking plays a vital role here, as it helps you anticipate potential objections and address them proactively. By presenting a balanced view and acknowledging uncertainties, you demonstrate respect for the other person's ability to make an informed choice. To ensure your persuasion efforts never slip into unethical territory, it's helpful to establish clear, red lines, boundaries you won't cross no matter how high the stakes. These might include never knowingly presenting false information, avoiding hidden agendas or ulterior motives, refraining from exploiting vulnerabilities or fears, respecting no as a valid answer and not resorting to pressure tactics. By adhering to these principles, you create a foundation for influence that is both effective and ethical. But make no mistake, this approach requires more effort and thoughtfulness than simple manipulation. It demands that you deeply understand your subject matter, consider multiple perspectives, and be willing to engage in genuine dialogue. The rewards, however, are well worth the effort. When you persuade ethically, you not only achieve your immediate goals, but also build lasting relationships and a reputation for integrity. You contribute to a culture of trust and rational discourse, which benefits everyone in the long run. As we delve deeper into the strategies and techniques of ethical persuasion in the coming chapters, keep this paradox in mind. The most powerful influence often comes not from clever tricks or forceful tactics, but from a place of honesty, critical thought, and mutual respect. By embracing this paradox, you'll unlock the true potential of persuasion, the ability to change minds and inspire action while maintaining your integrity and building trust. The journey ahead will challenge you to think critically about your own beliefs and communication habits. You'll learn to craft compelling arguments, navigate cognitive biases, and engage in meaningful dialogue. But more than that, you'll discover how to become a force for positive change in your personal and professional spheres. As we conclude this introductory chapter, consider the words of the ancient philosopher Aristotle. Character may almost be called the most effective means of persuasion. In our exploration of the Persuasion Paradox, we'll see time and again how true this statement remains. By cultivating your character as an ethical, critical thinking persuader, you'll develop an influence far more potent and enduring than any manipulative tactic could provide. The path of ethical persuasion may not always be the easiest, but it is undoubtedly the most rewarding. As we move forward, we'll equip you with the tools and insights needed to navigate this path with confidence. You'll learn to harness the power of critical thinking, emotional intelligence, and clear communication to influence others without compromising your principles. In the chapters that follow, we'll delve into the foundations of critical thinking and how they apply to persuasion. We'll explore the classic pillars of ethos, pathos, and logos, and learn how to wield them ethically. You'll discover strategies for building trust and credibility, crafting logical arguments, and navigating the complex landscape of human emotions and biases. But perhaps most importantly, you'll learn to see persuasion not as a battle to be won, but as a collaborative journey toward understanding and mutual benefit. This shift in perspective is at the heart of the Persuasion Paradox, the realization that true influence comes not from dominating others, but from engaging with them honestly and respectfully. As we embark on this exploration together, prepare to challenge your assumptions about influence in communication. The insights you gain will not only make you a more effective persuader, but also a more thoughtful and ethical communicator in all aspects of your life. The power to influence without manipulation is within your grasp. Are you ready to embrace the paradox and unlock your full potential as an ethical persuader? Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Grow to the Top and activate notifications to receive more self-improvement tips that will supercharge your growth. And make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you for your support. Chapter 2: Critical Thinking Foundations for Persuasion. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast, uncharted wilderness. The terrain ahead is complex, filled with hidden pitfalls and unexpected challenges. This is the landscape of persuasion, a realm where ideas clash and minds meet. To navigate this territory successfully, you need more than just a map or a compass. You need a keen, discerning eye and a mind sharpened to cut through the underbrush of confusion and misinformation. This essential tool, this mental machete that will clear your path through the jungle of competing ideas, is critical thinking. But what exactly is critical thinking, and why is it so crucial to the art of persuasion? As we embark on this chapter, we'll unravel these questions, revealing layer by layer the profound impact that honing your critical faculties can have on your ability to influence others ethically and effectively. At its core, critical thinking is a disciplined process of actively analyzing and evaluating information to form clear, logical judgments. It's the art of not taking things at face value, of digging deeper, of asking why and how instead of simply accepting what. In the context of persuasion, critical thinking is your foundation, your bedrock. It's what allows you to construct arguments that are not just compelling on the surface, but that can withstand scrutiny and stand the test of time. But here's where things get interesting. Critical thinking isn't just a tool for crafting your own arguments. It's also the lens through which you view the world and the ideas of others. It's what allows you to anticipate objections, understand different perspectives, and adapt your approach when necessary. In essence, before you can hope to persuade anyone else, you must first become adept at critically assessing your own ideas and approaches. This might seem counterintuitive at first. After all, isn't the goal of persuasion to convince others that you're right? Shouldn't you be focusing on bolstering your own position rather than questioning it? But this is where the true power of critical thinking and persuasion reveals itself. By subjecting your own ideas to rigorous analysis, by being willing to consider counterarguments and alternative viewpoints, you actually strengthen your position. You identify weaknesses before your audience does, allowing you to address them proactively. You gain a deeper understanding of the nuances and complexities of your argument, enabling you to present it with greater clarity and conviction. Moreover, this approach demonstrates a level of intellectual honesty and humility that can be incredibly persuasive in its own right. When your audience sees that you've thoughtfully considered multiple angles and are presenting a well-reasoned, balanced view, they're more likely to trust your judgment and be open to your ideas. So how do we begin to cultivate this critical thinking mindset? It starts with understanding the key elements that make up critical thinking. The first of these is analysis, the ability to break down complex problems or arguments into their constituent parts. This involves identifying claims, examining the evidence presented to support those claims, and uncovering the underlying assumptions that may not be immediately apparent. For example, let's say you're trying to persuade your company to adopt a new project management system. Your initial impulse might be to simply list all the benefits of the new system, but a critical thinker would go deeper. They would break down the current system's shortcomings, analyze how the new system addresses each of these issues, and consider what assumptions are being made about the company's needs and resources. The next crucial element is evaluation. This is where you assess the credibility of information and the strength of reasoning. It's not enough to simply gather evidence. You need to be able to distinguish between strong, reliable sources and weak or biased ones. You need to be able to spot logical fallacies and recognize when an argument, while perhaps emotionally appealing, doesn't actually hold up under scrutiny. This skill is particularly important in today's information-rich and misinformation-rich environment. As a persuader, your credibility is one of your most valuable assets. By honing your ability to evaluate information critically, you ensure that the arguments you present are built on solid foundations. The third key element is inference, the ability to draw logical conclusions from the data and evidence you've gathered and analyzed. This is where you connect the dots, showing how your evidence leads to your conclusions. It's not enough to simply present facts. You need to show how those facts support your overall argument. These elements, analysis, evaluation, and inference, form the core of critical thinking. But they're not just abstract concepts. They're practical skills that you can develop and apply in your everyday life and in your persuasive efforts. As you begin to incorporate these elements into your thinking, you'll likely notice a shift in how you approach problems and arguments. You'll find yourself naturally questioning assumptions, looking for evidence, and considering alternative explanations. This is the beginning of cultivating a critical thinker's mindset. One of the hallmarks of this mindset is curiosity, coupled with healthy skepticism. It's about asking why, and is that really true, not out of a desire to be contrarian, but out of a genuine interest in understanding things more deeply. This curiosity drives you to explore issues from multiple angles, to seek out new information, and to constantly expand your understanding. For instance, when preparing to persuade others on a particular topic, a critical thinker doesn't just research arguments that support their position. They actively seek out opposing viewpoints, not to refute them outright, but to understand them. This approach often leads to surprising insights that can actually strengthen your original argument, or sometimes lead you to revise your position. This willingness to consider other perspectives and potentially revise your stance is another crucial aspect of the critical thinker's mindset. Open-mindedness. It's about recognizing that you don't have all the answers and that your initial views might be incomplete or even incorrect. This can be challenging, especially when you're invested in a particular position, but it's essential for effective persuasion. Why? because open-mindedness allows you to engage in genuine dialogue rather than mere debate. It shows that you value truth over ego, which can be incredibly persuasive in itself. When your audience sees that you're willing to consider their viewpoints seriously, they're more likely to extend the same courtesy to you. This leads us to another vital trait of critical thinkers: intellectual humility. This is the ability to acknowledge what you don't know and to seek out information to fill those gaps. It's about being comfortable saying, "I'm not sure," or "I need to learn more about that." Far from undermining your credibility, this honesty actually enhances it. It shows that you're more interested in getting to the truth than in being right at all costs. In the context of persuasion, intellectual humility can be a powerful tool. It allows you to connect with your audience on a more human level, to learn from them, and to adapt your approach based on new information. It also helps prevent blind spots in your arguments, areas where your lack of knowledge might lead you to make unfounded assumptions or overlook important counterarguments. The final piece of the critical thinker's mindset we'll explore is reflective thinking. This is about taking the time to step back and examine your own reasoning process. It's easy to get caught up in the heat of an argument or to rush into presenting your case without fully thinking it through. Reflective thinking is the antidote to this impulsiveness. By regularly pausing to reflect on your thought processes, you can identify areas where emotions might be clouding your judgment, where you might be relying too heavily on assumptions, or where your logic might have gaps. This self-awareness is crucial for developing strong, well-reasoned arguments. Now that we've explored the elements of critical thinking and the mindset it requires, let's consider how to apply these principles directly to your persuasive goals. The first step is to clearly define your purpose. What exactly are you trying to persuade someone of, and why? This might seem obvious, but it's surprising how often people launch into persuasive efforts without a clear, well-defined objective. Critical thinking comes into play here by forcing you to examine not just what you want to achieve, but why you want to achieve it. Is your goal logical and ethical? Are you seeking to persuade for the right reasons? By subjecting your purpose to this scrutiny, you ensure that your persuasive efforts are grounded in integrity from the start. Once you've clarified your purpose, the next step is to understand your audience's context. This is where critical observation comes in. Instead of making assumptions about your audience's needs, values, and viewpoints, you need to gather and analyze information about them. This might involve research, conversations, or careful observation of their behavior and responses. The key here is to approach this process with an open and analytical mind. Avoid the temptation to project your own beliefs onto your audience or to make broad generalizations based on limited information. Instead, look for patterns, ask questions, and be willing to revise your understanding as you gather more data. With a clear purpose and a solid understanding of your audience, you can then move on to anticipating questions and objections. This is where critical self-questioning becomes invaluable. Put yourself in your audience's shoes and ask, if I were them, what holes or counter-arguments would I see in this? This exercise not only helps you strengthen your argument by addressing potential weaknesses proactively, but it also demonstrates respect for your audience's intelligence and perspective. Finally, there's the crucial step of research. As a persuader, your credibility rests largely on the quality of information you present. Critical thinking is essential here for fact-checking claims, evaluating the reliability of sources, and synthesizing information from multiple perspectives. It's about going beyond surface-level information to develop a nuanced, well-supported understanding of your topic. As you engage in this research, be wary of confirmation bias, the tendency to seek out information that confirms your existing beliefs while ignoring contradictory evidence. A true critical thinker actively looks for information that challenges their views, knowing that this is often where the most valuable insights lie. By applying these critical thinking principles to your persuasive efforts, you create arguments that are not just superficially convincing, but that stand up to scrutiny and resonate on a deeper level. You become not just a persuader, but a thought leader, someone whose ideas are respected and sought after. But perhaps the most profound impact of incorporating critical thinking into your persuasive approach is how it changes you. As you cultivate these skills and habits, you'll likely find that your own understanding deepens, your perspectives broaden, and your ability to engage in meaningful dialogue improves. You become not just a more effective persuader, but a more thoughtful, discerning individual overall. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. Developing critical thinking skills is a lifelong journey, one that requires consistent practice and a willingness to challenge your own assumptions and biases. But the rewards, both in terms of your persuasive abilities and your personal growth, are immeasurable. As we conclude this exploration of critical thinking as the foundation for persuasion, it's worth reflecting on how these skills will inform the strategies we'll discuss in the chapters to come. Each technique, each approach to influence that we'll explore, will be grounded in this framework of rigorous ethical thinking. But there's more to persuasion than just clear thinking and logical arguments. As powerful as critical thinking is, it's only one piece of the puzzle. In our next chapter, we'll delve into another crucial aspect of persuasion, one that has been recognized since ancient times as a cornerstone of influence. We'll explore how this element, when combined with critical thinking, can create a persuasive force that speaks not just to the mind, but to the very core of human decision-making. Are you ready to unlock the next level of your persuasive potential? Chapter 3, The Pillars of Persuasion, Ethos, Pathos, Logos, Critically Applied. In the grand theater of human communication, three actors have long held center stage. Their performance, when masterfully orchestrated, can move mountains, change minds, and inspire action. Yet, when poorly managed, they can lead to confusion, mistrust, and manipulation. These three powerful forces have been known to us since ancient times, whispered in the halls of Greek academies and debated in Roman forums. But what are they, and why do they hold such sway over the human mind? As we embark on this chapter, we'll peel back the layers of these mysterious influences, revealing how they shape our perceptions, decisions, and beliefs. We'll explore how, when wielded with skill and ethical consideration, they form the bedrock of persuasive communication. But more than that, we'll discover how to harness their power in a way that respects both the persuader and the audience, creating a dialogue of mutual understanding and growth. Let's begin our journey with a simple question. What makes an argument truly convincing? Is it the cold, hard facts presented in logical order, the passionate plea that tugs at our heartstrings, or perhaps the unwavering confidence of the speaker that makes us want to believe? The truth, as we'll discover, lies in a delicate balance of all these elements and more. The first of our trio is a quiet yet powerful presence. It doesn't shout for attention or dazzle with flashy rhetoric. Instead, it builds slowly, earning trust through consistent demonstration of knowledge, integrity, and goodwill. This is the realm of ethos, the appeal to character and credibility. Ethos is the foundation upon which all other persuasive efforts are built. Without it, even the most logical arguments or heartfelt appeals may fall on deaf ears. But what exactly is ethos, and how can we cultivate it? At its core, ethos is about establishing trustworthiness, authority, and rapport with your audience. It's the reason we're more likely to take medical advice from a doctor than from a random person on the street. It's why we pay attention when an experienced professional speaks about their field of expertise. But ethos isn't just about credentials or titles. It's about demonstrating character, showing that you're not only knowledgeable, but also honest, ethical, and have the audience's best interests at heart. Critical thinking plays a crucial role in building authentic ethos. It requires an honest assessment of your own expertise and credibility. Do you truly have the facts straight? Have you acknowledged the limitations of your knowledge or experience? This self-reflection isn't about undermining your authority, but about strengthening it. By openly recognizing what you know and what you don't, you demonstrate intellectual honesty, which can be far more persuasive than feigned omniscience. Consider the difference between a speaker who claims to have all the answers and one who admits, "That's an interesting point. I don't have all the information on that aspect, but here's what I do know, and here's how we might find out more. The latter approach, grounded in critical thinking, builds trust and invites the audience into a collaborative exploration of the topic. There are several techniques you can employ to build ethos effectively. Transparency about your motives is key. Clearly stating why you're advocating for a particular position and what you hope to achieve can dispel suspicions of hidden agendas. Citing reputable evidence not only supports your arguments, but also shows that you've done your homework and are basing your views on solid foundations. Another powerful technique is using even-handed language and presenting multiple sides of an issue. This doesn't mean you can't advocate for a specific position, but by acknowledging and fairly representing opposing viewpoints, you demonstrate fairness and a comprehensive understanding of the topic. This approach also inoculates you against potential counter-arguments, as you've already addressed them in a balanced manner. However, as we build ethos, we must be wary of the pitfalls of false ethos. Exaggerating credentials, name-dropping without substance, or borrowing authority you haven't earned can quickly backfire. A critically thinking audience will see through such tactics, and once trust is broken, it's exceedingly difficult to regain. As we transition from ethos, we encounter our second pillar of persuasion, logos, the appeal to logic and reason. If ethos is about establishing why the audience should listen to you, logos is about giving them compelling reasons to agree with you. Logos is the realm of clear reasoning, valid arguments, and supporting evidence. It's the backbone of any persuasive effort, providing the substance that supports your claims. But logos isn't just about presenting facts and figures. It's about structuring your argument in a way that leads the audience step by step to your conclusion, making it feel almost inevitable. Crafting logical arguments requires careful thought and planning. Start with a clear, persuasive claim, the main point you want your audience to accept. Then, support this claim with a combination of facts, statistics, expert opinions, and logical reasoning. The key is to create a chain of logic that your audience can follow, where each point builds upon the last. Critical thinking is essential in constructing strong logos-based arguments. It helps you identify and avoid logical fallacies, errors in reasoning that can undermine your credibility. For instance, the slippery slope fallacy assumes that one small step will inevitably lead to a chain of related events, often without evidence for this inevitability. Another common pitfall is the false dichotomy, presenting only two options when other alternatives exist. By applying critical thinking to your own arguments, you can spot these weaknesses before your audience does. Ask yourself, does this conclusion logically follow from the premises? Am I making any unwarranted assumptions? Are there alternative explanations I haven't considered? Clarity and organization are crucial when presenting logical arguments. A well-structured presentation helps your audience follow your reasoning and arrive at your conclusion alongside you. Consider organizing your ideas in a problem, solution, benefits format, or use a chronological approach if appropriate. The goal is to make your logic so clear and compelling that your audience feels they've reached the conclusion on their own. While logos appeals to the mind, our third pillar of persuasion speaks to the heart. This is pathos, the appeal to emotions and values. Pathos is what makes an argument resonate on a personal level, moving beyond cold facts to touch on what truly matters to your audience. Pathos involves engaging the audience's emotions and values to create a meaningful connection and motivate action. It's the difference between saying, option A will increase efficiency by 25%, and option A will free up time for you to focus on the creative aspects of your work that you're passionate about. Both statements might be true, but the second speaks to values and emotions in a way the first doesn't. However, pathos is also where the line between ethical persuasion and manipulation can become blurry. This is where critical thinking becomes especially crucial. We must use emotional intelligence and careful consideration to gauge which emotions are appropriate and authentic for our message. The goal is to create genuine empathy and understanding, not to exploit fears or insecurities. Storytelling and imagery are powerful tools for conveying pathos. A well-chosen anecdote or metaphor can make abstract concepts tangible and relatable. For instance, comparing a complex process to a familiar everyday activity can suddenly make it understandable and memorable. The key is to ensure these stories or images genuinely illuminate your point rather than distract from it. When employing pathos, it's essential to maintain clear boundaries to avoid manipulative tactics. Spreading unwarranted fear, playing on guilt, or making empty emotional appeals are not only unethical but can backfire if your audience sees through them. Instead, focus on keeping emotional appeals honest and grounded in reason. Pathos should serve to illustrate and reinforce your logical arguments, not replace them. The true art of persuasion lies in integrating ethos, logos, and pathos into a cohesive whole. Each element supports and enhances the others. Your ethos makes the audience receptive to your logical arguments, while pathos helps them connect with the implications of those arguments on a personal level. Consider how you might use a personal story, combining ethos and pathos, to illustrate a data point, logos, or how establishing your credibility, ethos, can make your audience more receptive to both your logical arguments and your emotional appeals. The goal is to create a persuasive message that engages the whole person, mind, heart, and sense of trust. As we apply critical thinking to these pillars of persuasion, we must constantly evaluate the balance between them. Too much focus on logos can make your argument dry and uninspiring, while over-reliance on pathos might make you seem manipulative or lacking in substance. Ethos must be consistently maintained throughout, as a single misstep can undermine your credibility. The key is to remain flexible and attuned to your audience. Different situations and different audiences may require varying emphasis on each element. A technical audience might respond better to a logos-heavy approach, while a more general audience might need more pathos to engage with the topic. Your ethos should be tailored to what that specific audience values in a credible source. Remember, the goal of ethical persuasion is not to trick or coerce, but to guide your audience to a genuine understanding and agreement. By thoughtfully applying ethos, logos, and pathos, vetted through the lens of critical thinking, you create arguments that are not only persuasive, but also respectful of your audience's intelligence and autonomy. As you practice integrating these elements, you'll find that your persuasive abilities grow not just in formal presentations or debates, but in everyday interactions. You'll become more adept at building trust, presenting clear arguments, and connecting with others on an emotional level, all while maintaining your integrity and ethical standards. The journey of mastering these pillars of persuasion is ongoing. Each interaction is an opportunity to refine your skills, to find that perfect balance of credibility, logic, and emotional resonance. As you continue to hone these abilities, you'll find yourself becoming not just a more effective communicator, but a more thoughtful and empathetic one as well. But even as we master these timeless principles of persuasion, we must recognize that they don't operate in a vacuum. The human mind, with all its complexity and quirks, plays a crucial role in how these appeals are received and processed. As we look ahead to our next chapter, we'll delve into the fascinating world of cognitive processes that can either amplify or obstruct our persuasive efforts. What hidden forces shape our decisions and beliefs, often without our conscious awareness? And how can understanding these forces make us not only better persuaders, but more discerning thinkers in our own right? Prepare to embark on a journey into the labyrinth of the human mind, where reason and intuition intertwine in unexpected ways. Chapter 4. Navigating Cognitive Biases in Persuasion. Imagine you're an explorer, venturing into uncharted territory. The landscape before you is filled with hidden traps, optical illusions, and paths that seem to lead one way, but actually go another. This is the terrain of the human mind, particularly when it comes to decision-making and belief formation. As a persuader, you're not just an explorer in this landscape, you're a guide, trying to lead others through it safely and ethically. But here's the twist. You're not immune to these illusions and traps yourself. In fact, you might be so accustomed to some of them that you don't even notice they're there. These mental pitfalls, these quirks of cognition that can lead us astray without us even realizing it, are what psychologists call cognitive biases. Understanding these biases is crucial for anyone seeking to persuade ethically and effectively. They're the invisible forces that can make even the most logical argument fall flat, or conversely, give undue weight to a weak position. They're the reason why two people can look at the same set of facts and come to wildly different conclusions. And they're at work all the time, in every interaction, whether we're aware of them or not. But what exactly are these biases? Where do they come from, and why do we have them? As we delve deeper into this chapter, we'll uncover the nature of these mental shortcuts, exploring how they shape our perceptions, decisions, and beliefs. More importantly, we'll learn how to recognize them, both in ourselves and in others, and develop strategies to navigate around them. Let's start by considering why our brains rely on these shortcuts in the first place. In a world overflowing with information, our minds need ways to process and make sense of it all quickly. Cognitive biases are essentially mental shortcuts that help us make decisions and judgments rapidly. They're not inherently bad. In many cases, they serve us well, allowing us to navigate complex social situations and make split-second decisions when necessary. However, these same shortcuts can lead us astray when it comes to more complex reasoning, especially in situations where we need to carefully consider multiple perspectives or analyze large amounts of data. This is where the art of persuasion intersects with the science of cognition. To be truly effective in influencing others, we need to understand how these biases operate and how they can affect both our own thinking and that of our audience. One of the most pervasive and influential biases in persuasion is confirmation bias. This is our tendency to notice, seek out, and give more weight to information that confirms what we already believe, while ignoring or discounting evidence that contradicts our existing views. It's a powerful force that can make it extremely difficult to change someone's mind once they've formed an opinion. Consider how this plays out in a persuasive context. If you're trying to convince someone of a new idea that goes against their current beliefs, you might present a series of compelling facts and logical arguments. But if your audience is operating under the influence of confirmation bias, they might simply tune out anything that doesn't align with their pre-existing views. They're not necessarily being stubborn or close-minded. Their brain is simply doing what it's wired to do, looking for information that confirms rather than challenges their understanding of the world. This bias doesn't just affect how we receive information, it also influences how we seek it out. We tend to gravitate towards sources that align with our existing beliefs, creating echo chambers that reinforce our views. This can lead to a polarization of opinions, where different groups become more and more entrenched in their opposing viewpoints, each convinced that they have all the facts on their side. As a persuader, being aware of confirmation bias is crucial. It means recognizing that simply presenting facts, no matter how compelling, may not be enough to sway your audience. Instead, you need to find ways to present your information that don't immediately trigger the brain's defensive mechanisms. This might involve starting with areas of agreement before gradually introducing new ideas, or framing your argument in a way that aligns with your audience's existing values and beliefs. Another powerful bias that can significantly impact persuasion is the anchoring bias. This is our tendency to rely too heavily on the first piece of information we receive when making decisions. That initial piece of information becomes an anchor that influences all subsequent judgments, even if it's not particularly relevant or accurate. In persuasion, the anchoring bias can be both a challenge and a tool. If your audience has already anchored to a particular idea or figure, it can be difficult to shift their perspective. On the other hand, if you're able to provide the initial anchor, you can significantly influence the direction of the conversation. For example, in negotiations, the first number put on the table often serves as an anchor, influencing all subsequent offers and counteroffers. This is why skilled negotiators often try to be the first to propose a figure. They're setting the anchor that will frame the rest of the discussion. But the ethical persuader must be careful here. While understanding anchoring can make your persuasion more effective, exploiting it can cross the line into manipulation. The goal should be to use your understanding of anchoring to present information fairly and in a way that helps your audience make better decisions, not to trick them into agreeing with you. The availability heuristic is another bias that plays a significant role in how we process information and make decisions. This is our tendency to overestimate the importance or likelihood of things that come to mind easily, often because they're recent, vivid, or emotionally charged. In the context of persuasion, the availability heuristic can lead people to give undue weight to dramatic anecdotes or recent events, even if they're not representative of the broader reality. A single vivid story can sometimes be more persuasive than a mountain of statistical data, simply because it's easier for our brains to recall and process. This bias can be particularly challenging when you're trying to persuade someone about risks or probabilities. People tend to overestimate the likelihood of events that they can easily recall or imagine, while underestimating the probability of less dramatic or familiar occurrences. As an ethical persuader, your task is twofold when it comes to the availability heuristic. First, you need to be aware of how it might be influencing your own thinking. Are you giving too much weight to recent or dramatic events in your analysis? Second, you need to consider how to present information in a way that acknowledges this bias in your audience. This might involve using vivid examples to illustrate your points, but always in conjunction with broader, more representative data. The status quo bias is yet another mental shortcut that can significantly impact persuasion, especially when you're advocating for change. This is our tendency to prefer things to stay the same or to change as little as possible. It's the cognitive inertia that makes us resistant to new ideas or ways of doing things, even when the current situation is far from ideal. This bias can be a major hurdle if you're trying to persuade someone to adopt a new approach or make a significant change. People may irrationally cling to the current state of affairs, even if it's demonstrably inferior to the proposed alternative. This isn't because they're stubborn or irrational. It's because our brains are wired to see change as risky and potentially threatening. To overcome the status quo bias, you need to do more than just highlight the benefits of your proposal. You also need to address the perceived risks and uncertainties associated with change. This might involve breaking down the proposed change into smaller, less daunting steps, or drawing parallels with successful changes made in the past. Now that we've explored some of the key biases that can affect persuasion, let's turn our attention to strategies for overcoming them. The first and perhaps most crucial step is simply awareness. Learning to recognize these biases, both in yourself and in others, is half the battle. One effective technique is to practice naming the biases as you encounter them. If you catch yourself dismissing information that doesn't align with your views, you might think, I need to be careful of confirmation bias here. This simple act of labeling can help create the mental space needed to step back and evaluate the situation more objectively. For your audience, you can introduce the concept of biases in a non-threatening way. Rather than accusing someone of being biased, you might say something like, it's natural for all of us to give more weight to information that confirms our existing beliefs. Let's try to look at this from different angles to make sure we're not missing anything important. Another powerful strategy is to actively seek out contradictory evidence. This is especially important when you're formulating your own arguments. Before trying to persuade others, challenge your own position. What are the strongest arguments against your view? What evidence exists that might contradict your conclusions? By doing this, you not only strengthen your own understanding, but also prepare yourself to address potential objections from your audience. When it comes to helping your audience overcome their biases, asking thoughtful questions can be more effective than making direct statements. Instead of telling someone they're biased, you might ask, What information might we be missing here? Or how would this look from a different perspective? These types of questions encourage reflection and can gently guide people to examine their own thinking more critically. Presenting a complete picture is another crucial tactic. When making your case, strive to provide balanced information, including both pros and cons. A two-sided argument, where you acknowledge and address potential drawbacks or counter-arguments, can actually be more persuasive than a one-sided presentation. This approach demonstrates fairness and thoroughness, which can help overcome the audience's potential bias against ideas that challenge their existing beliefs. Sometimes, to overcome biases like the availability heuristic, you may need to fight fire with fire, or in this case, vivid example with vivid example. If your audience is fixated on a particular anecdote or scenario, you might need to provide an equally compelling counterexample or analogy that captures their attention and helps shift their perspective. As we navigate these biases, it's crucial to maintain an ethical approach. While understanding cognitive biases can make your persuasion more effective, there's a fine line between leveraging this knowledge ethically and exploiting it for manipulation. Many popular influence tactics, such as appealing to social proof or creating a sense of scarcity, work by tapping into our cognitive biases. While these can be powerful tools, it's important to use them judiciously and honestly. The goal should always be to help your audience make better decisions, not to trick them into agreeing with you. One way to maintain ethical standards is to be transparent about your persuasion techniques. You might explain to your audience why you're presenting information in a certain way. For instance, you could say, "I'm going to start with an overview before we dive into the details, so we don't get too anchored on any one piece of information." This approach treats your audience as partners in clear thinking, rather than targets to be manipulated. It's also important to adjust your approach based on your audience. A highly analytical person might be less swayed by emotional appeals and more interested in hard data. Conversely, someone who relies more on intuition and gut feelings might find dry statistics less compelling than vivid examples or personal stories. The key is to use your critical thinking skills to analyze your audience's thinking style and tailor your approach accordingly. As we conclude this exploration of cognitive biases in persuasion, it's worth reflecting on the broader implications of this knowledge. Understanding these biases doesn't just make us more effective persuaders, it also makes us more discerning thinkers and decision-makers in our own right. By learning to recognize and navigate around cognitive biases, we open ourselves up to a more nuanced and accurate understanding of the world. We become better equipped to evaluate information critically, to consider multiple perspectives, and to make more rational decisions. Moreover, this understanding fosters a kind of intellectual humility. Recognizing that we're all subject to these biases can make us more empathetic and patient, both as persuaders and as listeners. It reminds us that disagreements often arise not because people are being willfully ignorant or stubborn, but because we're all viewing the world through our own unique cognitive lenses. As you move forward in your journey to become a more effective and ethical persuader, keep these biases in mind. Use your understanding of them not as a tool for manipulation, but as a means of fostering clearer communication and better decision-making for all involved. Remember, the goal of ethical persuasion isn't to win at all costs, but to guide others towards a more accurate and beneficial understanding of the world. By navigating cognitive biases skillfully and ethically, you can help create an environment where ideas are evaluated on their merits, rather than dismissed or accepted based on mental shortcuts. As we look ahead to the next chapter, we'll delve into another crucial aspect of persuasion, one that forms the bedrock of all influential communication. It's an element so fundamental that without it, even the most logically sound and bias-free argument can fall flat. What is this essential component, and how can mastering it transform not just your persuasive abilities, but the very nature of your interactions with others? Prepare to explore a dimension of influence that goes beyond words and logic, touching the very heart of human connection. Chapter 5. Building Trust and Credibility as a Persuader. In the intricate dance of human interaction, there exists a silent currency, more valuable than gold, more powerful than the most eloquent words. It's a force that can open doors, change minds, and move mountains. Yet, it's as fragile as glass, easily shattered and painstakingly difficult to rebuild. What is this mysterious element that holds such sway over our decisions and beliefs? As we embark on this chapter, we'll unravel the nature of this elusive quality, exploring how it forms the very foundation of effective persuasion. We'll discover why, without it, even the most logically sound arguments can fall on deaf ears, and how its presence can make even the simplest words resonate with profound impact. But what exactly is this quality? How can we cultivate it, nurture it, and wield it ethically in our quest to influence others? These are the questions that will guide our journey through this crucial aspect of persuasion. At its core, this element is about connection, a bridge between the persuader and the audience. It's about creating a space where ideas can flow freely, where doubts can be addressed openly, and where mutual understanding can flourish. In essence, it's about creating an environment where persuasion becomes not a battle of wills, but a collaborative exploration of ideas. As we delve deeper, you'll come to understand that this quality is not something you can fake or manufacture. It's not a mask you can put on or a script you can recite. Instead, it's a reflection of your character, your intentions, and your actions over time. It's about who you are, not just what you say. So, what is this crucial element? It's trust, coupled with its close companion, credibility. These twin forces form the bedrock upon which all effective persuasion is built. Without them, your words, no matter how eloquent or logical, may fall on skeptical ears. With them, you create a receptive environment where your ideas can take root and flourish. But trust and credibility are not given. They must be earned. And that's where the real work of persuasion begins. Not in crafting clever arguments or emotional appeals, but in building a foundation of trust and establishing yourself as a credible source. Let's start by examining the components of trust and credibility. At first glance, these might seem like abstract concepts, but they're actually made up of very concrete elements that we can identify and cultivate. The first of these is expertise. When we're trying to persuade someone, they need to believe that we know what we're talking about. This doesn't necessarily mean having advanced degrees or decades of experience, though these can certainly help. Rather, it's about demonstrating a deep and nuanced understanding of the topic at hand. Showcasing expertise isn't about boasting or overwhelming your audience with jargon. Instead, it's about using specific, accurate information and being prepared to answer detailed questions. It's about showing that you've done your homework and thought deeply about the issue from multiple angles. Critical thinking plays a crucial role here. Before you attempt to persuade others, you need to rigorously examine your own knowledge. Have you verified your facts? Can you explain complex concepts in simple terms? Are you aware of the latest developments or counter-arguments in your field? By subjecting your own expertise to critical scrutiny, you ensure that you're truly as knowledgeable as you claim to be. But expertise alone isn't enough. The second crucial component is trustworthiness. Your audience needs to believe not just that you know what you're talking about, but that you're being honest and straightforward with them. This involves more than just not lying, though that's certainly important. It's about being transparent about your motivations, admitting when you don't know something, and following through on your promises. Small actions can go a long way in building trustworthiness. For instance, citing reputable sources for your information shows that you're not just making claims based on your own opinion. Admitting the limitations of your knowledge or the potential drawbacks of your proposal demonstrates honesty and a commitment to truth over winning an argument. The third component is goodwill or empathy. This is about showing that you genuinely care about your audience and their interests. It's not enough to be knowledgeable and honest. People also need to feel that you have their best interests at heart. Demonstrating goodwill might involve framing your message in terms of how it benefits the audience, not just yourself. It could mean actively listening to their concerns and adapting your approach based on their feedback. It's about showing that you're not just there to push your own agenda, but to find a solution that works for everyone. Lastly, there's the element of similarity and rapport. We tend to trust people who we feel are like us or who understand our perspective. This doesn't mean you need to be identical to your audience, but it does mean finding common ground and shared values. Building rapport might involve mirroring the communication style of your audience while remaining authentic, or highlighting experiences or values you share. It's about creating a sense of "we're in this together" rather than "me versus you." Now that we understand the components of trust and credibility, how do we go about earning and maintaining them? This is where the real art of persuasion comes into play. One of the most powerful principles in building trust is consistency. What you do before and after your persuasive attempt is just as important as what you say during it. If your words and actions align over time, you build a reputation for reliability. Conversely, if you say one thing but do another, your credibility quickly crumbles. This principle of consistency extends to your ethical behavior as well. By consistently adhering to ethical practices, never lying, always respecting others' autonomy, following through on commitments, you build up a long-term trust reserve. Over time, people learn that your persuasive attempts are worth considering because you've proven yourself to be credible and trustworthy. Transparency is another key factor in building trust. Being open about your intentions and reasoning can disarm suspicion and create an atmosphere of honesty. Instead of hiding your motivations, clearly explain why you're proposing a certain course of action and how you arrived at your conclusions. Active listening and responsiveness also play a crucial role. When you're trying to persuade someone, it's easy to fall into the trap of just pushing your own message. But by genuinely listening to your audience's feedback and questions and thoughtfully addressing their points, you show respect and build trust. This back and forth creates a dialogue rather than a monologue, making the audience feel heard and valued. Paradoxically, admitting faults or weaknesses can actually increase your credibility. It might seem counterintuitive. Shouldn't you present yourself as flawless and your arguments as bulletproof? In reality, acknowledging limitations or past mistakes shows that you value truth over winning at all costs. It demonstrates humility and a commitment to honest communication. The key is to do this in a way that doesn't undermine your main message. For instance, you might say, "While this proposal does have some upfront costs, which I want to be upfront about, I believe the long-term benefits far outweigh these initial investments." This approach shows that you've considered potential drawbacks and are presenting a balanced view. Building trust and credibility is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process. Every interaction is an opportunity to either deposit or withdraw from your trust account. Small lies or exaggerations, even if they seem insignificant at the time, can quickly deplete your credibility. On the other hand, consistent honesty and ethical behavior, even in minor interactions, steadily build up your trustworthiness over time. But what happens when trust is low or mistakes have been made? How can a persuader recover from a credibility deficit? The first step is recognizing when there's a trust issue. This requires keen observation and self-awareness. Are people skeptical of your claims? Do you notice a lack of engagement or enthusiasm when you speak? Are you getting pointed questions about your credibility or motivations? These can all be signs that there's a trust deficit you need to address. If you find yourself in a situation where you lack expertise on a particular topic, the worst thing you can do is fake it. Instead, be honest about the limits of your knowledge and borrow credibility appropriately. This might mean bringing in an expert to support your points or citing authoritative sources. The key is to position yourself as an honest broker of information, not as someone pretending to know more than you do. When mistakes happen, and they inevitably will, how you handle them can either further damage your credibility or actually enhance it. The key is to own up to errors quickly and completely. If you've provided incorrect information, correct it as soon as possible. If your message has been received with distrust, take the time to understand why and address those concerns directly. This is where critical thinking becomes especially important. Analyze what went wrong, why it happened, and how you can prevent similar issues in the future. Then, communicate this analysis to your audience. Showing that you've thought deeply about the mistake and are taking concrete steps to rectify it can go a long way in rebuilding trust. Remember, building trust and credibility is not just about individual persuasive attempts. It's about nurturing long-term relationships. Even outside of formal persuasion situations, your reliability and helpfulness contribute to an environment where your voice is respected and your ideas are given serious consideration. Rebuilding trust after it's been damaged is a challenging but not impossible task. It requires consistent effort over time, demonstrating through your actions that you've learned from past mistakes and are committed to honest, ethical behavior. It might involve setting and meeting small commitments to gradually rebuild confidence, or being extra transparent about your processes and decision-making to reassure skeptical parties. As we conclude this exploration of trust and credibility in persuasion, it's worth reflecting on the profound impact these elements can have. When you establish yourself as a trustworthy, credible source, you create an environment where your ideas can be heard and considered fairly. You move from being someone who's trying to push an agenda to someone whose opinion is sought out and valued. Moreover, the process of building trust and credibility doesn't just make you a more effective persuader, it makes you a better communicator and leader overall. The skills and habits you develop in establishing trust, honesty, empathy, consistency, critical self-reflection are valuable in all aspects of life, both personal and professional. As you move forward in your journey to become a more effective and ethical persuader, keep trust and credibility at the forefront of your mind. Remember that every interaction, every communication is an opportunity to either build or erode trust. By consistently choosing to act in ways that foster trust and demonstrate credibility, you create a solid foundation for all your persuasive efforts. But even with a strong foundation of trust and credibility, the art of persuasion requires more. In our next chapter, we'll delve into a skill that can transform your ability to influence others. It's a technique that, when mastered, allows you to construct arguments so clear, so compelling, that they seem to lead inevitably to your desired conclusion. What is this powerful tool, and how can it elevate your persuasive abilities to new heights? Prepare to unlock a method that will not only enhance your influence, but also sharpen your own thinking in ways you might never have imagined. Chapter 6. Crafting Logical and Clear Arguments. In the grand tapestry of persuasion, there exists a thread so fundamental, so essential, that without it, even the most impassioned pleas or charismatic deliveries fall flat. This thread, when woven skillfully, creates a fabric of influence so strong that it can withstand the harshest scrutiny and the most stubborn resistance. But what is this crucial element, this backbone of persuasive communication? As we embark on this chapter, we'll unravel the mystery of this vital component, exploring how it forms the very structure upon which all effective persuasion is built. We'll discover why, without it, even the most credible speaker or the most emotionally resonant message may fail to truly convince. And we'll learn how to harness its power to create arguments that not only persuade, but illuminate, leaving our audience not just agreeing, but understanding. But what exactly is this element? How can we cultivate it, refine it, and deploy it with precision in our quest to influence others? These are the questions that will guide our journey through this crucial aspect of persuasion. At its core, this element is about clarity, a beacon that cuts through the fog of confusion and complexity. It's about creating a path of reasoning so clear, so logical, that your audience can't help but follow it to your conclusion. In essence, it's about constructing an argument so sound, so well-structured, that it becomes almost self-evident. As we delve deeper, you'll come to understand that this quality is not about tricks or manipulation. It's not about overwhelming your audience with jargon or dazzling them with complexity. Instead, It's about respect. Respect for your audience's intelligence, respect for the truth, and respect for the power of clear logical thinking. So, what is this crucial element? It's the art of crafting logical and clear arguments. This is the skill that separates truly persuasive communicators from those who merely speak loudly or appeal to emotions without substance. It's the ability to take a complex idea, break it down into its component parts, and reassemble it in a way that's not only understandable but compelling. But crafting such arguments is no easy task. It requires careful thought, critical analysis, and a deep understanding of how logical reasoning works. It demands that we examine our own ideas as rigorously as we would those of our opponents, and that we build our case not on wishful thinking or assumptions, but on solid evidence and sound reasoning. Let's start by examining the building blocks of a logical argument. At the heart of every persuasive message lies a claim, a statement or proposition that you want your audience to accept. This claim is the cornerstone of your argument, the thesis around which everything else revolves. Identifying and clarifying your claim is the first and perhaps most crucial step in crafting a logical argument. It might seem simple, but it's surprising how often people launch into persuasive efforts without a clear idea of what exactly they're trying to convince others of. Can you state your main point in one concise, unambiguous sentence? If not, you need to refine your thinking before you can hope to persuade others. Once you have a clear claim, the next step is to gather supporting evidence. This is where critical thinking becomes especially important. It's not enough to simply find facts that seem to support your position. You need to evaluate the quality and relevance of that evidence critically. Are your sources reliable? Is the data recent and applicable to your specific situation? Have you considered evidence that might contradict your claim, or are you falling prey to confirmation bias? These are the kinds of questions a critical thinker asks when assembling evidence. But having a claim and evidence isn't enough. You also need to explain why that evidence supports your claim. This is what logicians call the warrant, the bridge that connects your evidence to your conclusion. Often, this connection might seem obvious to you, but it's crucial to make it explicit for your audience. For example, let's say your claim is that a certain policy should be implemented. You might present evidence that a similar policy was successful elsewhere, but why does that success elsewhere mean it would work in your situation? That's the warrant you need to explain. Every argument also rests on certain assumptions. These are the underlying beliefs or premises that you're taking for granted. Identifying and addressing these assumptions is a key part of crafting a logical argument. Are there unstated premises in your reasoning that might not be shared by your audience? If so, you need to either justify those assumptions or reconsider your argument. Now that we understand the basic components of a logical argument, how do we organize them for maximum impact? This is where the art of persuasion meets the science of communication. One effective approach is to structure your argument in a problem-solution-benefits format. Start by clearly outlining the problem or challenge, then present your proposed solution, and finally, explain the benefits of implementing that solution. This structure gives your argument a natural flow that's easy for your audience to follow. Alternatively, you might choose a chronological approach, especially if you're arguing for a change in policy or behavior. Describe the past, how things have been done, and why that's no longer sufficient. The present, the current challenges or opportunities, and the future, how your proposed solution will lead to better outcomes. Regardless of the overall structure you choose, clarity in expression is paramount. Use plain language whenever possible, and if you must use technical terms or jargon, be sure to define them clearly. Remember, confusion is the enemy of persuasion. If your audience can't understand your argument, they certainly won't be persuaded by it. One powerful tool for making abstract or complex arguments more accessible is the use of examples and analogies. A well-chosen comparison can illuminate your point in a way that dry facts alone cannot. However, be careful to ensure that your analogies are apt and not misleading. A false equivalence can undermine your credibility and weaken your entire argument. When presenting data or statistics, consider how to make them digestible for your audience. Round numbers when possible. Use comparisons to make large figures more relatable, and focus on the most impactful data points rather than overwhelming your audience with every detail. As you craft your argument, it's crucial to be aware of common logical fallacies that can undermine your persuasive efforts. These are errors in reasoning that, while sometimes convincing on the surface, don't actually support your conclusion logically. One common fallacy is the ad hominem attack, where instead of addressing someone's argument, you attack the person making it. Not only is this logically unsound, but it also often backfires, making you appear petty or unable to engage with the actual issues at hand. Another fallacy to watch out for is the straw man argument. This involves misrepresenting your opponent's position to make it easier to attack. While this might seem like a clever tactic, astute audiences will recognize it for what it is, a form of intellectual dishonesty that undermines your credibility. The appeal to false authority is yet another pitfall to avoid. This involves citing an expert or authority figure who isn't actually qualified in the relevant field. As a critical thinker, it's important to verify the credentials of any experts you cite and ensure they're truly relevant to your argument. To strengthen your argument and make it more resilient to challenges, consider the technique of inoculation. This involves introducing a likely counterargument to your position and then refuting it with evidence. By doing this, you not only show that you've considered other viewpoints, but you also prepare your audience to resist that counterargument if they encounter it later. Research has shown that this approach leads to more durable persuasion. Audiences who have been inoculated against counterarguments are less likely to change their minds when they encounter those opposing views later. As you near the end of your argument, pay special attention to your conclusion. A strong conclusion should do more than just recap your main points. It should tie everything together and clearly state what you want your audience to believe or do as a result of your argument. Critically examine your conclusion to ensure it strictly follows from the arguments you've presented. Avoid introducing new claims or evidence at this stage. Your conclusion should be the logical culmination of everything you've already discussed. Throughout this process of crafting your argument, it's invaluable to get a second pair of eyes on your work. Encourage peer review or seek out a trusted colleague to critically evaluate your argument before you present it. They might catch unclear points or weak logic that you've overlooked, allowing you to strengthen your case before facing your intended audience. Remember, the goal of crafting a logical and clear argument isn't just to win a debate or get your way in the moment. It's about fostering genuine understanding and agreement. When you present a well-reasoned, clearly structured argument, you're not just persuading, you're educating. You're inviting your audience to follow your thought process, to examine the evidence alongside you, and to arrive at a conclusion based on sound reasoning rather than emotional manipulation or rhetorical tricks. This approach to persuasion is not only more ethical, but it's also more effective in the long run. Arguments built on solid logical foundations are more likely to withstand scrutiny and lead to lasting change. They're more likely to be remembered and repeated by your audience, extending your influence beyond the immediate interaction. Moreover, the skills you develop in crafting logical arguments will serve you well beyond your persuasive efforts. They'll sharpen your critical thinking abilities, making you a more discerning consumer of information and a more effective problem solver in all areas of life. As you practice these techniques, you'll likely find that your thinking becomes clearer and more organized. You'll become more adept at spotting flaws in reasoning, both in others' arguments and in your own initial thoughts. This self-awareness and ability to self-correct is invaluable in an age where we're constantly bombarded with information and persuasive messages. But even as you master the art of logical argumentation, it's important to remember that humans are not purely rational beings. While a clear, well-reasoned argument is the foundation of effective persuasion, it's not always sufficient on its own. There's another dimension to human decision-making, one that can sometimes override even the most impeccable logic. In our next chapter, we'll explore this powerful force, a factor that can amplify the impact of your logical arguments or, if mishandled, completely negate them. What is this mysterious element that bridges the gap between reason and action, between understanding and conviction? How can we harness its power ethically and effectively to create truly transformative persuasion? Prepare to delve into a realm where logic meets emotion, where the mind and heart converge in the art of influence. Chapter 7: Empathy and Emotional Intelligence in Persuasion. In the intricate dance of human interaction, there exists a hidden language, one that speaks louder than words and resonates deeper than logic. It's a force that can bridge divides, soften resistance, and open hearts and minds to new possibilities. But what is this mysterious power, and how can we harness it ethically in our quest to influence others? As we embark on this chapter, we'll unravel the nature of this elusive quality, exploring how it forms a crucial complement to the logical arguments we've discussed previously. We'll discover why, without it, even the most meticulously crafted reasoning can fall flat, failing to truly move our audience to action or change. But what exactly is this quality? How can we cultivate it within ourselves and use it to create genuine connections with those we seek to persuade? These are the questions that will guide our journey through this vital aspect of influence. At its core, this element is about connection, a bridge between the persuader and the audience that goes beyond mere words or facts. It's about creating a space where ideas can be shared not just intellectually, but emotionally, where mutual understanding can flourish on a deeper level. In essence, it's about recognizing and honoring the full humanity of those we interact with, including their feelings, values, and experiences. As we delve deeper, you'll come to understand that this quality is not something you can fake or manufacture. It's not a mask you can put on or a script you can recite. Instead, it's a genuine capacity to tune into and respond to the emotional landscape of your interactions. It's about who you are and how you relate to others, not just what you say or how you say it. So, what is this crucial element? It's empathy, coupled with its close companion, emotional intelligence. These twin forces form a powerful complement to the logical foundations of persuasion we've explored. Without them, your carefully constructed arguments, no matter how sound, may fail to truly resonate with your audience. With them, you create an environment where your ideas can take root not just in the mind, but in the heart as well. But empathy and emotional intelligence in persuasion are not about manipulation or exploiting emotions. They're about acknowledging and respecting the emotional realities of human interaction and decision-making. They're about creating a connection that makes influence possible, not by overriding reason, but by creating a receptive space where reason can be truly heard and considered. Let's start by examining what we mean by emotional intelligence in the context of influence. Emotional intelligence, often abbreviated as EI, is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions, as well as to recognize and influence the emotions of others. In persuasion, this skill becomes invaluable, allowing you to tune into the emotional state of your audience and respond in a way that aligns with their feelings and values. One key component of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. This involves recognizing your own emotional state when you're attempting to persuade others. Are you feeling nervous, overly eager, frustrated? These emotions, even if you try to hide them, can subtly influence your audience's reception of your message. By being aware of your own emotional state, you can take steps to regulate it, ensuring that you're in the best possible mindset for effective communication. For instance, if you notice that you're feeling anxious before an important presentation, you might take a moment for a few deep breaths to calm yourself. This self-regulation not only helps you perform better, but also prevents your anxiety from unconsciously communicating to your audience and undermining your message. Another crucial aspect of emotional intelligence in persuasion is empathy, or social awareness. This is about tuning in to how your audience feels. Are they bored, resistant, intrigued? By picking up on verbal and nonverbal cues, tone of voice, facial expressions, body language, even silence, you can gauge their emotional response and adjust your approach accordingly. For example, if you notice confusion or skepticism on your audience's faces, you might pause to address concerns or clarify a point, even if it wasn't in your original plan. This responsiveness shows that you're attuned to their needs and helps maintain their engagement with your message. Understanding the role of emotions in decision-making is also crucial for effective persuasion. Psychological research has shown that people often make decisions based on emotions and then use logic to justify those decisions afterward. This doesn't mean that logical arguments are unimportant, far from it, but it does mean that connecting on an emotional level can provide a foundation for the acceptance of your logical arguments. By acknowledging and addressing the emotional aspects of a decision, whether it's hope for positive change, fear of the unknown, or frustration with current circumstances, you create a more complete and compelling case for your position. However, it's important to note that authenticity is key when it comes to emotional intelligence in persuasion. An audience can often sense when empathy or emotional appeals are insincere. Emotional intelligence isn't about manipulating emotions, but about genuinely engaging with and caring about the other person's perspective and feelings. If you find that you don't actually care about the audience's well-being or perspective, that might be a sign that you should reconsider whether you should be trying to persuade them on this particular point. Ethical persuasion requires a genuine belief that what you're advocating is in the best interest of both parties. Now that we understand the importance of emotional intelligence in persuasion, let's explore some practical techniques for demonstrating empathy and connecting with your audience on an emotional level. One of the most powerful ways to show empathy is through active listening. This involves more than just hearing the words someone is saying. It's about fully focusing on the speaker, understanding their message, and responding thoughtfully. When you practice active listening, you demonstrate that you value the other person's perspective, which in turn makes them more likely to value yours. Some specific techniques for active listening include maintaining eye contact, nodding to show understanding, and using verbal affirmations like "I see" or "I understand." Perhaps most importantly, it involves paraphrasing what you've heard to ensure you've understood correctly. For instance, you might say, "So, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're concerned about..." This not only shows that you're listening, but also gives the other person a chance to clarify if you've misunderstood anything. Another powerful empathic technique is mirroring and validation. This involves reflecting back the emotions you're hearing from the other person and acknowledging them as legitimate. For example, if someone expresses frustration, you might respond with, "I can see why you'd feel frustrated. There have been a lot of changes to deal with." Note that validating an emotion doesn't necessarily mean you agree with all of the person's views or actions. It simply means you're acknowledging their feelings as real and understandable. Storytelling can also be a powerful tool for empathic persuasion. By sharing scenarios or experiences that resonate with your audience's situation, you demonstrate understanding and create a sense of shared experience. This can help bridge gaps and make your audience more receptive to your ideas. The language you use can also convey empathy and create a sense of connection. Using inclusive language, such as "we" instead of "you" versus "me," can foster a sense of collaboration rather than opposition. Expressing appreciation for the other person's perspective, even if you disagree with it, can also go a long way in building rapport and openness. As we consider these empathic techniques, it's crucial to maintain a balance between emotion and logic in our persuasive efforts. Empathy and emotional intelligence should complement, not replace, the logical arguments we've discussed in previous chapters. It's important to reiterate the difference between using emotion to connect and using it to manipulate. Ethical persuasion isn't about exploiting emotions or playing on fears. It's about acknowledging real emotions and addressing them honestly and constructively. For instance, if your audience has legitimate concerns or fears about a proposed change, Acknowledging those fears and addressing them with both empathy and factual information is ethical and effective persuasion. The appropriate balance of emotion and logic can vary depending on the situation. In some contexts, a calm, measured approach might be most effective, while in others, showing passion and enthusiasm could be more persuasive. Critical thinking comes into play here as you assess the context and choose the most appropriate emotional tone. For example, when dealing with a crisis situation, projecting calm confidence can help reassure your audience and make them more receptive to your guidance. On the other hand, when trying to motivate a group that seems apathetic or disengaged, showing your own genuine enthusiasm for the topic can be infectious and help spark interest. One particularly challenging scenario is persuading an audience that's angry or anxious. In such situations, a step-by-step approach can be helpful. First, acknowledge the emotions present. You might say something like, "I can see that many of you are frustrated by this situation, and I understand why." This validation helps the audience feel heard and can lower defenses. Next, show alignment with their concerns. Express that you care about the same issues they do. This creates a sense of being on the same side rather than in opposition. Finally, address their concerns with a combination of empathy and reasoned arguments. By blending emotional understanding with logical solutions, you create a persuasive approach that speaks to both heart and mind. Throughout this process, emotional self-regulation is crucial. If your audience responds with hostility or becomes highly emotional, it's important to keep your own emotions in check. Techniques like not taking things personally, pausing before responding, and continuing to respond with empathy rather than defensiveness can help maintain trust and keep the lines of communication open. Remember, the goal of using empathy and emotional intelligence in persuasion isn't just to win an argument or get your way in the moment. It's about fostering genuine understanding and creating lasting positive change. When you approach persuasion with true empathy and emotional intelligence, you're not just influencing decisions, you're building relationships and creating an environment of mutual respect and collaboration. This approach to persuasion is not only more ethical, but it's also more effective in the long run. People are more likely to stick with decisions they've made when they feel their concerns were genuinely heard and addressed. They're more likely to trust you and be open to your ideas in the future. And perhaps most importantly, they're more likely to feel empowered and positive about the outcome rather than feeling manipulated or coerced. Moreover, the skills you develop in empathic persuasion, self-awareness, emotional regulation, active listening, and the ability to connect with others are valuable far beyond just persuasive situations. They can enhance all of your interpersonal interactions, making you a more effective communicator, leader, and collaborator in all areas of life. As you practice these techniques, you may find that your emotional intelligence grows, making you more attuned not just to others' emotions, but to your own as well. This self-awareness can lead to personal growth and improved decision-making in your own life, as well as enhancing your ability to influence others positively. But even as you master the art of empathic persuasion, it's important to remember that influence is a complex, multifaceted process. While emotional intelligence and logical argumentation form a powerful combination, there's another dimension to persuasion that can amplify your effectiveness even further. In our next chapter, we'll explore a technique that can transform your ability to influence others in a profound way. It's an approach that, when mastered, allows you to guide others to insights and conclusions in a way that feels natural and unforced. What is this powerful method, and how can it elevate your persuasive abilities to new heights? Prepare to discover a way of influencing that doesn't just present ideas, but helps others uncover truths for themselves. Chapter 8: Asking and Listening, Socratic Methods of Influence. In the grand tapestry of human interaction, there exists a thread so subtle, so powerful, that it can unravel even the most tightly held beliefs and weave new patterns of thought. This thread, when skillfully pulled, doesn't force or coerce. Instead, it gently guides, invites, and illuminates. But what is this mysterious force, and how can we harness it in our quest to influence others ethically and effectively? As we embark on this chapter, we'll unravel the nature of this elusive quality, exploring how it forms a crucial complement to the logical arguments and emotional intelligence we've discussed previously. We'll discover why, sometimes, the most persuasive voice is not the one that speaks the loudest or presents the most facts, but the one that asks the right questions and truly listens to the answers. But what exactly is this quality? How can we cultivate it within ourselves and use it to create genuine shifts in perspective without imposing our will on others? These are the questions that will guide our journey through this vital aspect of influence. At its core, this element is about curiosity and collaboration, a dance between the persuader and the audience that goes beyond mere telling or convincing. It's about creating a space where ideas can be explored together, where insights can emerge organically, and where both parties can arrive at new understandings. In essence, it's about recognizing the wisdom that already exists within those we seek to influence and helping them uncover it for themselves. As we delve deeper, you'll come to understand that this quality is not about clever tricks or manipulative questioning. It's not about leading someone down a predetermined path to a conclusion you've already decided upon. Instead, it's a genuine process of discovery where you, as the influencer, must be open to new insights and willing to adapt your own thinking based on what emerges from the dialogue. So what is this crucial element? It's the art of asking powerful questions and truly listening to the answers, a method often referred to as the Socratic approach, named after the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates. This approach to influence doesn't rely on presenting prepared arguments or emotional appeals. Instead, it focuses on facilitating a dialogue that encourages critical thinking and self-discovery. The power of this method lies in a fundamental truth about human nature. We are far more likely to believe and act upon ideas that we feel we've discovered or concluded for ourselves, rather than those that are thrust upon us by others. By asking thoughtful questions and genuinely listening to the responses, we can guide others to insights and conclusions in a way that feels natural and unforced. Let's start by examining the art of asking powerful questions. The right question, asked at the right time and in the right way, can open up new avenues of thought, challenge assumptions, and lead to profound realizations. But what makes a question powerful? One key aspect is the use of open-ended questions. These are questions that can't be answered with a simple yes or no, but instead require thought and elaboration. For example, instead of asking, "Do you think this proposal is good?" you might ask, "What are your thoughts on this proposal?" The first question invites a quick judgment, while the second encourages reflection and a more detailed response. Open-ended questions often begin with words like how, why, or what. They invite the other person to explore their own thoughts and feelings, to articulate their reasoning, and to engage more deeply with the topic at hand. By asking such questions, you're not just gathering information, you're encouraging the other person to think critically about the issue. Another powerful technique is the use of guiding questions. This involves asking a series of questions that lead the other person toward a realization or conclusion. The key here is to structure your questions in a way that helps the other person explore the issue from different angles, consider consequences, and potentially recognize flaws in their initial thinking. For instance, if you're trying to persuade someone of the need for change, you might start by asking about their desired outcomes, then about the obstacles to those outcomes, and finally, about potential solutions. Through this process, the person may come to recognize the need for change on their own without feeling that the idea was forced upon them. The Socratic method also involves a specific sequence of questioning that can be particularly effective in uncovering truths and exposing flaws in reasoning. This sequence typically starts with questions about definitions. What do you mean by X? Moves on to probing assumptions. What assumptions are we making here? And then explores consequences. If we do Y, what do you expect will happen? This systematic approach to questioning helps both parties gain a clearer understanding of the issue at hand. It can gently expose inconsistencies or gaps in thinking without directly attacking the other person's position. Instead, it invites them to examine their own reasoning more closely. However, it's crucial to emphasize that the tone and phrasing of your questions are just as important as their content. The goal is to create a safe space for exploration and discovery, not to trap or embarrass the other person. Your question should come from a place of genuine curiosity and a desire to understand, not from sarcasm or a need to prove yourself right. Now, asking powerful questions is only half of the equation. The other half, equally important, is truly listening to the answers. This is where the art of active listening comes into play. Active listening involves giving your full attention to the speaker, not just waiting for your turn to talk. It means nodding, making appropriate eye contact, and giving brief verbal affirmations to show you're engaged. But it goes beyond these surface-level behaviors. True active listening involves trying to understand the speaker's perspective, even if you disagree with it. One powerful technique in active listening is reflection. After the person has spoken, you paraphrase what you've heard to ensure you've understood correctly. This might sound like, "So, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're concerned about." This not only helps clarify any misunderstandings, but also shows the speaker that you're genuinely trying to grasp their point of view. Building on the responses you hear is another crucial skill in this approach to persuasion. When someone raises a point or concern, acknowledge it and use it as a springboard for further exploration. For example, you might say, "That's an interesting point. How do you think we might address that concern?" This turns the conversation into a collaborative problem-solving session rather than a debate or argument. As you listen, pay attention not just to the words being said, but to the underlying interests and values they reveal. Sometimes, what someone says they want and what they actually need are two different things. By identifying these deeper motivations, you can often find common ground or alternative solutions that address the core issues at stake. Of course, not every conversation will go smoothly. Sometimes people may evade questions or become emotional. In these situations, the skills of active listening become even more crucial. Respond with empathy, acknowledge the emotions you're observing, and gently steer the conversation back on track. Patience and understanding in these moments can often lead to breakthroughs in the dialogue. As you practice this method of influence, you'll find that it requires a different kind of preparation than traditional persuasion techniques. Instead of scripting out arguments, you'll be planning potential questions and follow-ups. You'll need to anticipate objections, not to argue against them preemptively, but to formulate questions that might help the other person examine those objections more critically. This approach also requires a willingness to let go of control to some extent. You need to be prepared to listen to things you might not expect and to adapt your approach based on what emerges from the dialogue. Your critical thinking skills come into play here as you synthesize new information on the fly, incorporating the other person's input into your understanding of the situation. There may come times in the conversation where it's appropriate to gently assert a point, especially if the other person seems to be arriving at a conclusion but hasn't quite articulated it yet. In these moments, you can help connect the dots, summarizing the insights that have emerged from your questions and their responses. As the dialogue progresses, it's important to periodically summarize and check for agreement. This helps ensure that you and the other person are on the same page and that the conclusions being reached are truly shared ones. It's a way of closing the loop and cementing the insights that have been gained through the conversation. Throughout this process, it's crucial to maintain respect for the other person's autonomy. Even after engaging in this thoughtful dialogue, they may not be fully convinced of your position, and that's okay. The goal of this approach is not to force agreement, but to encourage critical thinking and open-mindedness. Often, the seeds planted during such a conversation will continue to grow in the other person's mind long after the dialogue has ended. As we conclude this exploration of the Socratic method of influence, it's worth reflecting on the profound impact this approach can have. When you engage in this kind of thoughtful questioning and active listening, you're not just trying to win an argument or impose your will. You're participating in a collaborative search for truth and understanding. You're showing respect for the other person's intelligence and perspective, while also gently challenging them to think more deeply about their own views. This approach to persuasion is not only more ethical, but it's often more effective in the long run. People are more likely to fully embrace and act upon ideas that they feel they've arrived at themselves. They're more likely to trust you and be open to future discussions if they feel that you genuinely listen to and value their input. Moreover, the skills you develop in this method, asking thoughtful questions, listening actively, synthesizing information on the fly, are valuable far beyond just persuasive situations. They can enhance all of your interpersonal interactions, making you a more effective communicator, problem solver, and leader in all areas of life. As you practice these techniques, you may find that your own understanding deepens and evolves. By truly listening to others and exploring ideas through questioning, you open yourself up to new perspectives and insights. This approach to influence becomes not just a way of changing others' minds, but a path to continuous learning and growth for yourself as well. But even as you master the art of Socratic influence, it's important to remember that persuasion is a multifaceted process. While thoughtful questioning and active listening are powerful tools, they are part of a larger toolkit of influence techniques. In our final chapter, we'll explore how to bring together all the elements we've discussed: logical argumentation, emotional intelligence, and Socratic dialogue into a cohesive and ethical approach to persuasion. What does this integrated approach look like in practice? How can we navigate the complexities of real-world persuasion situations while maintaining our ethical standards and effectiveness? Prepare to discover a framework that not only enhances your ability to influence others, but also contributes to more meaningful and productive interactions in all areas of your life. Chapter 9, The Ethical Persuasion Toolkit, Putting It All Together. As we reach the culmination of our journey through the landscape of ethical persuasion, we stand at a vantage point where all the paths we've explored converge. The terrain we've covered has been varied and complex, from the logical foundations of critical thinking to the nuanced realms of emotional intelligence and Socratic dialogue. Now, it's time to synthesize these diverse elements into a cohesive, powerful approach to influence that respects both the persuader and the audience. This final chapter is not just a summary of what we've learned, but a roadmap for applying these principles in the real world. It's one thing to understand individual techniques. It's quite another to weave them together seamlessly in the heat of a persuasive moment. Our goal here is to equip you with a flexible, ethical toolkit that you can adapt to any situation where influence is needed. Let's begin by considering the overarching philosophy that guides our approach. Ethical persuasion through critical thinking is not just a set of tactics, it's a holistic process, a mindset that informs every aspect of how we interact with others when we're trying to influence them. It's about recognizing that the means by which we persuade are just as important as the ends we're trying to achieve. This approach might sometimes seem slower or less immediately powerful than manipulative tactics. In a world that often values quick wins and immediate results, taking the time to build trust, present logical arguments, and engage in genuine dialogue can feel like the scenic route. But here's the crucial insight. This path, while perhaps longer, leads to far more durable and positive outcomes. When you consistently apply critical thinking and ethical principles to your persuasive efforts, you're not just winning arguments, you're building a reputation. Over time, this reputation becomes a form of ethos, credibility that precedes you and amplifies your influence in every new situation. People come to know you as someone who is thoughtful, honest, and respectful in your approach to influence. This reputation opens doors and creates opportunities for influence that manipulative tactics could never achieve. Moreover, this approach recognizes that persuasion doesn't happen in a vacuum. How you persuade affects not just the immediate outcome, but your relationships, your character, and the broader environment in which you operate. By treating persuasion as a collaborative, truth-seeking effort rather than a battle to be won at all costs, you contribute positively to your workplace culture, personal relationships, or public discourse. With this philosophical foundation in mind, let's explore how to put these principles into practice. The first step in any persuasive effort is thorough planning. Begin by clearly defining your objective. What exactly are you trying to achieve? Be specific and ensure that your goal is ethically sound. Then, turn your attention to understanding your audience. Who are you trying to persuade? What do they know about the topic? What are their values, biases, and concerns? This analysis will guide your selection of tools from the Ethical Persuasion Toolkit. Perhaps your audience is highly analytical, calling for a strong emphasis on logical argumentation. Or maybe trust is a significant issue, requiring you to focus heavily on establishing credibility and rapport. The situation might call for a formal presentation, or it might be better suited to a Socratic dialogue. Your toolkit is diverse. The key is choosing the right tools for the job at hand. As you prepare your content, use critical thinking to gather and evaluate your evidence. Craft your core arguments with care, ensuring they're logically sound and well-supported. But don't stop there. Also prepare key questions that will engage your audience in critical thinking alongside you. Your plan should incorporate elements of ethos, credibility, logos, logic, and pathos, emotion, in a sequence that makes sense for your specific situation. Before you execute your plan, take a moment for an ethical check. Are all your facts verified? Are you respecting your audience's autonomy, or are there elements of hidden coercion in your approach? Do you genuinely believe that what you're proposing is in the best interest of all parties involved? This final review ensures that you're firmly on the side of influence without manipulation. When it's time to put your plan into action, begin by establishing trust and common ground. This might involve referencing a shared goal or concern, or simply demonstrating that you understand and respect your audience's perspective. Use a tone that's confident but friendly, and if appropriate, share why the issue at hand matters to you personally. This authenticity can go a long way in building rapport. As you present your case, integrate the various techniques we've explored smoothly and dynamically. You might start with a brief story that illustrates the need for change, appealing to pathos. Then present a key statistic to back up your point, logos, and cite a reputable source to bolster your credibility, ethos. If the situation allows for interaction, don't hesitate to ask questions that involve your audience in the discussion. Listen actively to their responses and use them as springboards for further exploration. Throughout your persuasive effort, remain alert to feedback, both verbal and nonverbal. If you notice confusion, be ready to clarify or slow down. If you sense resistance, consider pivoting to a more empathetic approach or using Socratic questioning to explore the source of that resistance. Your critical thinking skills should be actively engaged throughout, continuously evaluating whether your approach is effective and adjusting as needed. Even if you encounter tough questions or opposition, maintain your composure and respect for your audience. Avoid knee-jerk retorts or dismissive comments. Instead, demonstrate the temperament of a critical thinker, calm, reasoned, and genuinely curious. This approach will uphold your credibility even in challenging moments. As you near the conclusion of your persuasive effort, take time to summarize the journey you've taken together. Recap the key points or agreements reached in a clear, neutral way. If you're calling for specific action, state it plainly and invite your audience to join you in taking that step. Because you've built your case ethically and logically, this call to action should feel like a natural culmination rather than a pressured push. Remember to leave room for reflection, especially if you're asking for a significant decision or change. Acknowledge that you don't expect instant agreement and invite your audience to take time to consider what you've presented. This respect for their autonomy demonstrates confidence in your position and in their ability to make a thoughtful decision. Always end by expressing appreciation for your audience's time, input, and openness. This gratitude reinforces goodwill and leaves the door open for future interactions, regardless of the immediate outcome. If you don't achieve your desired outcome immediately, don't discard your ethical toolkit. Persuasion is often an ongoing process. Maintain your integrity, follow through on any commitments you've made, and be open to revisiting the discussion after your audience has had time to reflect. Your consistent ethical approach can persuade indirectly over time by building respect and trust. As we conclude this exploration of ethical persuasion, it's worth reflecting on the broader implications of this approach. By embracing these principles, you're not just becoming a more effective persuader, you're becoming a more thoughtful, ethical communicator and leader. You're contributing to a world where ideas are exchanged openly and honestly, where decisions are made based on critical thinking rather than manipulation or coercion. The paradox we introduced at the beginning of this book now reveals itself as no paradox at all. When you avoid manipulation and embrace ethical persuasion, you don't lose influence. You gain it in the ways that truly matter. People influenced through critical thinking and mutual respect are genuinely persuaded. They not only stick with the ideas they've embraced, but often become advocates themselves, extending your influence far beyond the initial interaction. As you move forward, I encourage you to practice these principles not just in formal persuasive situations, but in your daily interactions. Every conversation is an opportunity to hone your skills, to engage in thoughtful dialogue, to influence and be influenced in return. Make ethical persuasion a habit, and watch as it transforms not just your ability to influence others, but the quality of your relationships and the depth of your own understanding. In closing, I want to thank you for embarking on this journey of ethical persuasion. By choosing to influence others through critical thinking and respect, you're not just changing minds, you're changing the world for the better. You have the power to effect positive change while staying true to your principles. Use this power wisely, use it ethically, and watch as your influence grows in ways you might never have imagined. Remember the words of Aristotle, who recognized centuries ago that, when the two are presented with equal skill, truth is always more persuasive than falsehood. As you go forth to apply what you've learned, take heart in knowing that by choosing the path of ethical persuasion, you're aligning yourself with a timeless principle. You're not just winning arguments, you're elevating discourse, fostering understanding, and contributing to a more thoughtful, ethical world. The journey doesn't end here. Each interaction, each attempt at persuasion is an opportunity to refine your skills and deepen your understanding. Embrace these opportunities with enthusiasm and integrity. The path of ethical persuasion may not always be the easiest, but it is undoubtedly the most rewarding, for you, for those you influence, and for society as a whole. As you close this book and step back into the world, carry with you the knowledge that you now possess a powerful toolkit for ethical influence. But remember, persuasion is just one part of the communication puzzle. To truly maximize your impact, you need to master the art of expressing your ideas clearly and compellingly. How can you ensure that your carefully crafted arguments are understood and remembered? The answer lies in honing your critical thinking skills for effective communication. To continue your journey of personal growth and influence, I highly recommend you explore the audiobook Speak Smartly, Critical Thinking for Effective Communication. It's the perfect complement to what you've learned here, providing you with the tools to articulate your thoughts with precision and impact. Tap the center of the video now to continue your transformation journey.